it comes back to this idea of how churches are even structured. I mean, why is it that most churches look more like businesses than they do these organic communities of faith? Hey everybody, welcome back. Whiskey and the Writings is a place where we slow down, we pour a drink, and we wrestle with the big questions of faith, scripture, and life. It's a place for the spiritually curious, the skeptic, and the seeker who still wonders if there's still something good and true at the heart of it all. I'm your host, Joe Oliver, and I'm so glad you're here. We have an important conversation to have today when it comes to our faith and the church. I made a video earlier last year about church hurt and disappointment in the church, and that just got a lot of reactions. It was the most popular video I made all year last year, which seems to say and indicate that this is something that's real for people. It produces a set of emotions when I talk to people about church and their experiences with church. I've had numerous, more than I can count, conversations with people who have experienced frustration with the church and has distanced themselves from a local community church for a period of time altogether, and just have a general kind of like, I don't feel safe there because of how they were treated and interacted with. And those stories are real. And I'll tell you what frustrates me is I get onto the socials and I see the threads, and my threads are filled with stories that are kind of faith related. And I get a lot of content that just kind of pisses me off, if I'm being honest, because I hear church leaders get on and they rant and rave about those who have experienced hurt in the church. And instead of acknowledging and owning their part in that, they blame them as if they're just wanting to excuse the sin in their life, or they just don't want to submit to authority. That was a video that I saw the other day that just broke my heart. Like you're attacking these people and accusing them of just simply not wanting to submit to your authority. And I see this in a lot of evangelical churches, this idea of an authoritarian leadership style from the pastoral team. And I just think that needs to go away. Like, you're attacking these people and accusing them of just simply not wanting to submit to your authority. And I see this in a lot of evangelical churches, this idea of an authoritarian leadership style from the pastoral team. And I just think that needs to go away. Well, if you feel unsafe at the church, it's because, there's something wrong with you. Heaven forbid there's something wrong with the environment that they're in. But we're going to look at that because I think there's also some ownership that we can take in ourselves when we're asking these questions of churches and making these statements and observations about churches. So I think there's some ownership we can take on that end as well. So this is going to be a big topic, and it deserves a great bourbon to sip on, except I'm not dealing with a traditional bourbon today. I've got a whiskey here. This is actually a McClellan 12-year Scotch. Single malt whiskey. It is so good. I opened it up on my birthday and shared it with some friends, because that's what you do with whiskey, right? It's not meant to hoard. It's meant to share. It's meant to be enjoyed and have a drink with friends, laugh, have great conversation. And so I opened it up on my birthday. This was a gift for me by two people I've mentioned on this channel before, by Colin and Quinn, who are getting married here this year, and I'm participating in the wedding, and so they bought me some scotch because they know I like me some scotch as a gift. And so thank you, Colin and Quinn, once again for this beautiful gift. It is a Highland single malt Scotch whiskey. Now, in Scotland, they have different regions where they produce whiskey, and those regions produce a different style of whiskey. And I was lucky enough last year to spend some time in Scotland and get to have an experience at the whiskey experience there in Edinburgh. And it was just an amazing opportunity to get to learn more about Scotch whiskey, how it's made, where it comes from. And I didn't know this. I just thought there was kind of one kind of Scotch, but there's lots of different kinds. And the different regions that it's made, they all taste different. And my favorite of all that I tasted, the different regions, I think there's 7 maybe regions, but the one I liked and preferred the most was the Highlands Scotch Highland. So you can see here, that's why it's labeled what it is. That it's telling you the region that it's produced in, and being a 12-year. I mean, come on, anything above a 6, you're doing really well for a Scotch. And this 12-year is just so delicious, smooth, easy to drink. It's not like some people will say that Scotch has like a Band-Aid taste, if that makes sense to you. There's just kind of the smell, and it invokes like a Band-Aid. And so people don't like it. It has a peatiness to it as well, kind of like a very earthy taste to it. And this is not that. There are some of those notes in there, but pretty much this is just a smooth, just delicious. So if you see this on your liquor shelf, I encourage you, the McClellan 12-year. It's a bit more spendy than your other offerings, but definitely worth a purchase if you are able to. And we're going to drink this today because, again, the topic deserves a quality drink, because this is a quality kind of topic as we're talking about feeling safe in church and exploring how churches operate that cause an unsafe experience for people. Ways that we can fix that, work on that, grow from that, and what do you do with your own self in relation to church? Do you abandon church? Do you walk away from church? I think that's not the answer, and I think the answer is that there's something to be said about the community that God has put onto this earth. It just may not look like what you're used to it looking like, and we'll explore some of the reasons why in this episode as well. So whatever you have in front of you, I'm drinking McClellan 12-year Highland Scotch, delicious drink. Whatever you got, pour your drink, drink responsibly, and cheers. Here we go. So good. So good. So tasty. Okay. I do have some text that I want to explore with you. I do have some thoughts that I want to unpack with you. And so as I was forming my thoughts on this topic, again, this was when I reviewed last year's content, the topic on church hurt was the most popular content that I did. Again, it's because this is a real problem in the church, and I just want to respond to some of the videos that you see out there that want to put the blame on the person that is walking out of the traditional church that you may experience down the road from your house, or even the big kind of like mega church environment. There seems to be a pushback, and the language around this pushback comes from terms like deconstruction or de-churched or ex-evangelical. There are these concepts and this movement that's happening, that those who are still within those structures and systems are finding it very frustrating that people are walking away, and people are frustrated, and so there seems to be like a negative kind of reaction towards this type of conversation, as if the people that are a part of this conversation are attacking the church, or attacking the institution of the church, or rejecting the authority that God has placed on the pastors of that church. And I just reject that entirely. I think it's categorically wrong to project that as the basis by which people are walking away from church and walking away from leadership at the church. And I think that's an important distinction in and of itself, walking away from the leadership of the church. I've said this before on this channel when I've explored topics like this, that people don't quit places, they quit people. That's an old adage in business, that as a manager that I used to train other managers on leadership and in management in like a mid-level manager position. And one of the things that was said was that people don't quit their jobs, they quit people. It's this idea that the job is the job. It's the people that make up the experience in that job. And so when people quit the church, they may be more likely quitting you. If you're a leader in a church and you're watching this and you're already getting bristled at the fact that this is a conversation, the idea of this is that when people leave, they traditionally leave because of a person or people, not necessarily the idea of church. And there are some that conflate the two for sure, but by and large, the people that I talk to who walk away from church is because of poor leadership within the church. And so I think there's an aspect of this that leaders in the church need to own that and recognize that this is a real problem. And it comes back to this idea of how churches are even structured. I mean, why is it that most churches look more like businesses than they do these organic communities of faith? They are wrapped up into business model leadership, for-profit business model leadership, more than they are this organic coming together of people of faith, choosing to submit to one another and serve each other. It's a far cry from what we see in the New Testament. And that's not to say that I think we should look like the New Testament. I don't. I even reject this notion that we should, go back to the first century church. I don't think you can, nor do I think you should. I think God's story is constantly moving forward, and the goal of Christianity isn't to stay in one place. It's to advance the kingdom forward. And you do that through your culture, time, history, experience, and all those things influence and shape how you do things. So I have no problem with the advancement of how churches operate and run. I do have a problem when they take more cues from the business world than they do how Jesus taught us to operate within his kingdom. And so what you see are churches that are made up like businesses, meaning that they're more about policy and procedure and structure. They're more about hierarchy. Who's the CEO? Well, that's the lead pastor. He's the CEO. He gets to make all the decisions. He gets to determine what happens. Sometimes there's a board of directors. Sometimes there's not. Those are elders that are sometimes called in the churches, and these are voted on. This structure and this system that was created is not unlike what happened in the 3rd century. When Constantine comes to power, the church began to structure and organize itself to look much like the political system of the Roman Empire. The way that they developed leadership within the hierarchy of the church reflected more of a Roman political system than it did as an organic faith movement. And there are reasons for that, because when the church was pre-Constantine, it was a persecuted church. It was a church without power. It was a church without a voice. It was a church without an ability to come together by and large and organize itself. It was fractured into different regions and different places by different communities that sometimes thought different things. And so when the church started functioning under the leadership and the direction of the Roman Empire, it began to model itself a lot like the Roman Empire, to its, I think, to our dismay. So these things happen, and churches begin to grow. And what happens is that when the church was a 1st century, 2nd century movement, it was geographically based, meaning that you had a local community within a larger city. And we have that today. But certain things are changing with that, in the sense of like the new innovation of a megachurch. Okay, time for a quick pause. If Whiskey in the Writings has been helpful to you, there's a deeper layer of this conversation happening off of YouTube. Over on storiesoftove.com, Whiskey in the Writings has its own home. That's where I share extended reflections, behind-the-scene thoughts, and upcoming conversations that have never made it into these videos. It's also where you can sign up for our newsletter. No spam, no noise, just thoughtful writing, and a heads up on what's coming next. If you want to stay connected beyond the algorithm, head over to storiesoftove.com and sign up for the newsletter today. All right, let's get back into it. This idea that people would drive miles, 10, 15, 20 miles, 25 miles to get to a Sunday morning gathering was unheard of in the first century. And yet now, because of the advent of roads and the technologies that we have today, it's no big deal for people to drive 15 miles to find a church that they prefer versus the one that's next door that they could support in their local community. So now we have these large, huge businesses that are making hundreds and thousands of dollars building these extravagant multi-million dollar buildings with pastors that have six-figure incomes, with teams of staff around them, with mid-level managers and upper management. And again, it looks like a business. And so what happens is that when the church starts operating like a business, what happens is that the dysfunctions of that model actually become apparent within that community. You have abuse in power, people who get filled with the desire and the pursuit of more, of growth, and these lies that happen within the church that sit there and say, well, if you're not growing, then you're not advancing the kingdom. So it's got to be more baptisms. It's got to be more people serving in the church. It's got to be more ministry opportunities. It's got to be more services. We got to create more room. We got to add more chairs. We got to create systems around how to manage that, because the bigger that you get, the more it gets complicated. And now all of a sudden you create policies that control. You create circles that keep people in because you have to protect the church's culture. And so these are all, I think, toxic to churches, where we create systems of keeping people in. There's ways that when I was early on in pastoral ministry, one of the big things that was talked about in church leadership trainings was, how do you close the back door of your church? Which was a way to say that people come in, but then they leave after a few months. How do we stop them from doing that? And so you had these kind of leadership trainings that were all about how to create systems to keep people in. And so these are classes, these are small groups, these are ways to connect people relationally. And I say all of that, and I know I'm just kind of ranting here, but I say all that to say that these ways of organizing and leading the churches have become the problem by which people are being hurt and walked over, and that's causing people to leave and feel unsafe altogether in the church. And so that's a big setup of what I think the problem is. I think the problem is that our churches run more like businesses than they do actual faith communities. And anytime that happens, we've got a problem. And so if you're at a church right now and you're going, oh my gosh, Joe, that sounds just like my church, you need to prepare yourself, because there are going to be things that take place that may cause harm and discomfort for your journey with the Lord. And so I wrote a couple notes down that I want to explore here, because we're talking about churches that become unsafe. How does a church become unsafe? It begins with leadership. When the leadership structure of the church is more about control, God-given authority, authoritarianism, than it is about servanthood, about becoming the least among the community, then we've got an upside down structure. And a lack of safety in a church is when that leader of that church sees themselves higher than they ought to. And this is how this works. Again, I'm not talking from inexperience here, guys. I was a pastor for my entire adult life. I understand, as I've talked to hundreds of pastors over the years, and you see this continually being pushed out there. There's a statement that's said from those in church leadership. They say, God called me to this. God put a calling on my life. Now, what are they saying when they say that? Let's break that down. They believe that God, the creator God of the universe, made them, created them, or asked them to move into a space of pastoral leadership within a church. Now, that comes with a lot of weight, because to say that God asked me to do this means a lot of different things if you fail. You get where I'm going here with this, that the pressure and weight of, if God told me to do this and I don't do it well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my relationship with God? Does that mean that God's going to get mad at me? Is he going to get frustrated with me? What's going to happen to me if I quit, fail, or something goes wrong? And so what happens is that in the mind and the heart of a pastor, there's this internal weight, whether they recognize it there or not. And if any pastor that's been in ministry for more than 10 years understands the frustration of disappointment, discouragement, and asking themselves internally in their quiet space, am I meant to do this? And usually there's a perseverance, there's a pushing through, all of that happens. But unsafety begins when the leadership is unwell, is unhealthy, or is misaligned with the ethics of the kingdom. And so when you see unsafety unfold, when you see an abuse of power, it starts with that leadership. And you need to be able to recognize that. You need to be able to look at the person leading the church and ask yourself two questions. One, do they model Jesus in their everyday living? Two, are they more concerned with building the empire of the church or building the kingdom of God? Now, most pastors might say, by building the church, I'm building the kingdom. I reject that. The community of the people coming together is not the fulfillment of the kingdom of God. The fulfillment of the kingdom of God is when that community makes an impact on the greater community around them. It's not about building a safety net of clubs, of getting people in the door so that they feel they have a guarantee of their salvation. And as long as they serve enough, give enough, play along with the games of the church, that they're going to be okay. That just doesn't work out in actual practical Christianity. There is a mandate in Christianity to spread, to make disciples, to teach people the way of Jesus. And we have taken that from an external mandate and calling to an internal one, meaning the pastor wants you to get them on Easter, right? We've got 4 services on Easter, or even Christmas. We just came off Christmas. That's a good one. Hey guys, we're doing 4 Christmas services so you can get as many people here through the door so they can hear the gospel message. The problem with that is that you are supposed to be the gospel message, not the church and not the pastor. All right. The pastor is to be a shepherd. He is not what he has become in most evangelical churches, which is essentially a CEO, managing budgets, managing staff, managing people, managing systems, managing processes, making sure everything's functioning. That's like a CEO, casting vision. A pastor is someone who comes along and shepherds with care and love and servanthood. Yes, correction. Yes, insight. Yes, wisdom. But also with a loving and caring heart. And so what we're experiencing is that pastors today seem to be bent on just getting people in the door, right? And so we got to do more services. We got to create more room. We got to build a new building so people can get in here. Instead of training people to create those environments out there. I mean, what would it look like if we had spaces of churches that where communities were organically building because people were organically living their faith authentically out in the real place, and all of a sudden now they're doing meetups at their work on their lunch break, or in meeting up at a coffee shop once a week at night to have conversations about what does it mean to live out this faith in Jesus. How impactful would that be in our community, instead of our worry and concern about how do we get them to church, right? The challenge always being like, who are you bringing to church? Who are you bringing to church? And if you don't bring someone to church within a given year, what does that say about you, right? That's the frustration. And so what we see over and over again is this environment that's created that is not safe for people because the leader is unwell and upside down in the way that they're organizing themselves in the church. And I've seen this happen over and over and over again, where you have people in and then out, people in and then out. In fact, I have a theory, and I don't know if this theory is true, but I have a theory that churches have a 4 to 8 year cycle, which is to say this: if you start attending a church and you last 4 to 8 years, up to 8 years between that, you're at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in that window. Maybe I could even argue less than that as I'm thinking about it, but let's just say 4 to 8. If you're in that 4 to 8 year window at a church, I bet you have seen a full cycle through of attendees. The rarity that you have, the percentage of people within a given community that have been at a church more than 8 years is unseen today. In fact, the last communities I've been a part of, I could say that very thing. The last community I was at, when I got there, it seemed like there was a turnover in attendance. And I remember talking to someone out in the lobby as I was an attender, and they were making an observation about how they hardly know anybody. They've been there the longest and hadn't known anybody because all these people are coming in that are new. And I thought that was very interesting. Well, guess what? By the time I left that community, there was a whole new cycle of people that were coming through. And a lot of those people that were there before had already gone. This is what happens in churches. And it's just this kind of cyclical thing that takes place in communities. And the reason why is because there's a lot of brokenness within the church that is being projected onto other people instead of taking ownership from the leadership themselves. And so here's what I want to say to that. If you are someone who just can't walk inside a church, it gives you too much anxiety to enter in because you're just not sure what you're going to experience. Maybe you've come from a church that you have felt that hurt, that abuse, that frustration, and it doesn't feel safe to you. I want to encourage you with a couple things. One, I want to say that the community that was created, that Jesus had in mind, is still worth fighting for. And just because you haven't found one yet doesn't mean that they don't exist. I know of communities in my area that are extremely safe, life-giving communities, and I'm sure that there are some in your community. You're just going to have to do some work. And we don't reject the church just because we've seen abuse in the church. If you feel unsafe at your church, you need to have a conversation with the leadership there. You need to be willing to do the hard work of actually calling out, naming what is actually wrong and working through that tension. And then when it gets to the point where that community, whether or not they change or ask you to leave because you're causing too much of a problem, you can have the freedom at that point to move on and to find a community that will engage and wrestle with the things that are in your heart. I will say this about some churches that I think are doing their best, maybe just a little misguided. Not every church is going to be everything to all people, and that's okay. It's okay that the church you're at is not the church for you, or the church that you used to be at wasn't a good fit. That's okay. This idea that once you go to a church, you have to be there forever is just not. It's not realistic in the world that we live today. There's too much diversity. There's too much difference. There's too much in the way that churches function and believe and operate that it's not necessarily that you have to stay in one place all the time. You can have the freedom to look into other places, to see how that community operates, to actually ask the question, is this a safe place for me to exist in? And so I want to challenge you that you can find a church that is a place where you can get connected into and actually mature and grow as a disciple, find community in, which is really, really important. And I want to end with that because what we have here, I'm going to turn to the writing called Hebrews. There's there's this challenge in the writing of Hebrews that is a challenge for us that we be the kinds of people that continue in community. And what we see here is at the end of this writing, we have this kind of final wrap up in the writing of Hebrews, and he encourages them that they continue to meet together, that they don't stop coming together and meeting together as a community of people. And so what we see here is the writer says this in verse 24 of chapter 10. He says, "And let us take thought of how to spur one another on to love and good works, not abandoning our own meetings, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other, and even more so because you see the day drawing near." The writer of Hebrews is encouraging us that we be the kinds of people that don't abandon meeting together. Now, in this community, what was it like for them to those who were leaving and not showing up to the meetings? That's a big conversation. I think the overarching encouragement here that we can draw out of a text like this is that the writer's trying to get us to see that the ability for us to spur one another on towards good works, to the things that Jesus is leading us into in his kingdom, is something that we should continue to do, and can only happen when you surround yourself with a community of people that are doing that also. And that's not to say, and I'm going to end with this because I think it's important to say that within communities of gatherings of people, leadership is important. And that leadership that has been put in that place by a governmental structure, like maybe some sort of denomination or power, or maybe it's a plant church, and the person that's the main leader is the one who planted the church, and so they have this vision, this idea that they're working out, and it's your choice to participate in that. If it's a church plant or whatever church, it's your choice. If you choose to put yourself in a church community, it's really important to be a part of that leadership structure that is there, and to engage with that leadership structure. I also appreciate in Hebrews chapter 13 at the end, verse 17, it says this: "Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls and will give an account for their work. Let them do this with joy and not with complaints, for this would be of no advantage to you." So we see here, in addition to the writer saying, let's continue to meet together and encourage each other on to love and good works, the writer of Hebrews also is recognizing that there is a leadership structure there, that those people ought to be the kinds of people that are caring for you and not abusing their power over you. There is a difference. And if you have found a place where that leader is genuinely trying to care for you, and you disagree with that leader, I want to encourage you to have a conversation with that leader. Don't just walk out the door and don't, unless it's abusive. But even then, I want to encourage you to have the strength to have a conversation. It may not go well. Okay, I've been in those situations, but at least have the conversation. Speak truth to power. And when you see an abuse of power, be one to speak up. And if you're asked to leave, or you come to a point where you recognize that it's not safe for you to be in that environment anymore, it's okay to leave. We shouldn't abandon our faith because of it. We should recognize what it is. It is bad leadership exercised over a community of people. And when that happens, it creates unsafe environments for people. It causes abuse, it causes pain, and it causes hurt. And if you've been on the end of that, I want to see you and recognize you that you're not just someone who is unwilling to submit to authority, or someone who's just wanting to sin and that's why you're walking away or deconstructing or whatever. Those are just ways scared pastors talk about the things that they don't know how to deal with, or are unwilling to sit with people in. And so what they do is, out of fear, they react, they blame, they accuse, instead of actually dealing with the real problem. How did we get here? and what part did I play in it? And so I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this video and you've made it this far, to reach out to me, come talk to me. If you want to process this a little bit more, you can reach me on whiskeyandthewritings@gmail.com. You can email me there. You can head to our website, check us out at storiesoftove.com/whiskeyandthewritings. And engage in a conversation with me, and together maybe we can find a way forward. But yeah, so that's where we're at today. And when church becomes unsafe, it's because of leadership structures and business models that churches have become that create a place where the abuse of power, authoritarianism, runs rampant, causing pain and hurt in people's lives instead of sitting with them through processing with, helping answer questions, journeying with people. It's about control. It's about leveraging power. It's about empire. And when churches are like that, it becomes unsafe. That's not every church. But that's what we see happen. And so I want to encourage you, engage in the conversation. Don't give up on church just because you've seen abuse happen in it. There's more than likely a place, a community that wants to love and walk beside you wherever you're at. And I encourage you to find that place. And if you need help finding one, just let me know. I'd love to be a part of it. Thank you for watching this episode of Whiskey and the Writings. And yeah, I can't wait to see you again. Until then, cheers.